So if you look really, really close, like right there in the distance, you see cars going by in the background. And on Sunday at about 5 o'clock, you would have seen and heard the tanker truck that went driving up 35 north into a crowd of about 5,000 people. And what took place in the moments that followed as my wife and I listened to that tanker truck honking its horn and saw what we saw on TV was that from that space, thousands of protesters came running right down our street. And I was terrified. Full disclosure, I grabbed my weaponry and I looked at my wife and I said, Bryn, I think if we get in the truck right now, we can make our way west to the suburbs to our friend's house. And I think we should get out of here and we should stay safe. And she looked at me with tears in her eyes and she said, Keith, those people out there that are protesting right now, those people that we're watching run terrified, those are good people. And I just feel like they might need our help and I don't feel right about leaving. And I was silent as I took an inventory of where I was coming from. And it was an awakening. I realized that all I had done for the first 5 days of this entire experience of our city burning around us as I'm watching fires from our porch is I've sat in fear, paralyzed, and feeling like I had no voice and nothing to share on this topic. And I've worried exclusively about protecting us without a single thought about the cause and how I can contribute to it. And in that moment, my wife reminded me of one of my favorite quotes. My friend Jeremy said to me at one point, Jeremy Hansen, he said, it was a quote and I'm butchering it, but he said, Keith, good men worry about protecting their families. Great men worry about creating a community in which their families don't need to be protected. And I can't imagine anything more relevant to the moment. And so at 7:45 with an 8 o'clock curfew due to set in, I went outside and I took the dog out and I saw folks still in the streets, protesters, which included a group of white men dressed in full army tactical gear, body armor, etc., who looked like they were there for trouble. And I just was completely alive with the courage that my wife had instilled in me. And I cannot express enough that if not for her, there's no chance that I even have this conversation. And I managed to have a conversation with them about what they were doing. I asked them if they were aware of why the way that they were dressed and the optics and the message that it was sending. And in the end, the guy actually told me that he heard me and he was going to collect his friends and they were going to go home. Whether they did that or not, I don't know. I then had the opportunity to turn to some young black men and let them know that our hearts and our love was with them. And I can't begin to express to you how quickly and beautifully they responded to that with appreciation and acknowledgement. They pet the dog. We helped clear the streets for a little while to get people home before curfew, black, white, and everything in between. And then what we watched next was the National Guard, 20 plus SWAT team members, fire tear gas down our road and spend over 2 hours clearing our street. We watched it from the balcony. And when they'd cleared the street, someone yelled, "We love you," and everybody applauded them. And that was the first time in my life that I ever understood what white privilege actually meant. Now, I hate the term white privilege. And by the way, from a leadership and a PR perspective, if you're trying to get someone to understand that they have privilege, stop telling them that they're privileged. It makes them defensive. Just call it white perspective. That's all it is. It's our perspective. And from our perspective that night, we saw the police in the spirit in which they were intended, and in a beautiful act of service, keep us safe. Well, we live in a really nice neighborhood. We had this beautiful experience, and I realized how grateful I was that we got to have that experience. Meanwhile, it occurred to me that if I lived in an impoverished black neighborhood and I watched SWAT coming down my street, my first thought would not be, oh, I'm safer now. And I got it. I said, oh my God, this is what people have been telling me. This is what people have been telling me that I haven't been listening to, that I haven't been able to see, I haven't been able to hear. I finally experienced it and I got it. And that doesn't mean there was anything wrong with the police. They were amazing. We were grateful for them. But the idea that I get to be grateful for the police, that I've never once been afraid of a police officer in my entire life, was an awakening. So finally that night, I decided to post something on Facebook. Feeling like I had no voice up until this point, I suddenly felt a little bit awake, a little bit alive, and wanted to share because I'd finally contributed something. Just that simple little act of talking to a few people, I'd contributed something. And so I have this conversation, and no sooner than that, I get a text. I put it out of just a little post, a text from my buddy, Rene Rodriguez. He texts me and he says, "You have no idea how much it means to have somebody white with influence speaking on behalf of this cause." And I'm like, holy shit. I continue to completely miss the point that, like, I saw the fact that I was white and privileged as no reason to have a conversation around this, that I was just going to sound like I was pandering. And the moment I did something valuable, he reaches out to me with gratitude. And that's when I realized this: the riots are working. Now, the strongest take on Facebook right now is that the riots are wrong, and you can, man, just go down the feed. The riots are wrong. How is this respecting the memory of this man? What are we doing, to really, like, this is, hey, I understand being upset about what took place, but, the rioting isn't the way to do it. And that's when it occurred to me again. The riots are working. They scared the shit out of me, and I woke up. Thanks again to my wife, to Bryn, for telling me that we needed to be here to serve a community and a cause rather than just run from it and wait for it to get quiet again. And that's when I started to realize, man, this is really something. Because you've seen the post go around, but it's true. Because when Colin Kaepernick took a knee, I complained about that. We complained about that, said, hey, that's wrong. When Black Lives Matter first started 2 years ago, and I saw them on 35 walking down the road, I said, that's ridiculous, that's stupid, what are you doing? I said, that's wrong. Now when they're rioting, we're saying that's wrong. And if you notice, every single time this community tries to speak to the injustice they're experiencing, we don't talk about the issue, we tell them the way that they're doing it is wrong. I'll just say it this way. I've told them the way they're doing it is wrong. And I finally realized I keep changing the conversation on them. Instead of talking about the actual issue that young black men and women in America feel unsafe, unprotected, and targeted, which the data backs up, by the very institution that's designed to protect them, instead of having that conversation, I'm having a conversation about, yeah, but you're not doing it right. Then I see this post. I see a young black man holding a sign that said, white people, stop quoting Martin Luther King, you killed him too. We've been doing this for thousands of years. We just keep changing the subject. Hey guys, guess what? It's not a hot take to say that rioting is wrong. There is nothing insightful about that. Nothing. Instead, we've got to listen to what's being said. We've got to listen to what is being said. This is not our time to talk. This is our time to listen. I didn't understand the Black Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter movement when it first came out. I understood all lives matter, and I kept saying all lives matter. But thankfully, I have the wisdom of a 16-year-old black man, young man. He's 18 now, but at the time he was 16, Jakai, my little brother. And I sat down with him for lunch one day, and Jakai's a very dark-skinned young man. And we sat down to lunch one day, and I asked him for his perspective, having grown up in neighborhood of Cambridge. I said, dude, what's Black Lives Matter mean to you? And I was prepared completely to listen. And what he said blew me away. He said, all it means to me, Keith, is that Black Lives Matter too. Like, we just want to make sure that we're not forgotten. He wasn't seeking some elevated status. He was seeking equality. Black Lives Matter to him wasn't about an elevation to something superior. It was about an elevation to just be seen as equal. Ew, I've been hearing this for 10, 15 years, and I am really sorry it took me this long to listen. But please, just stop telling people that they're doing this wrong and start listening to find out what we're doing wrong, what you're doing wrong. I'm just gonna keep listening to what I'm doing wrong so I can start to do some things on behalf of a community that needs to be heard. This country's burning. Pay attention.